You were essentially a housewife who played with paintings, Grace. Let's not pretend otherwise. Those words echoed through the courthouse hallway. Her husband, the man she'd sacrificed everything for, 15 years of marriage, reduced to nothing. But Derek Sullivan had no idea who he was really dealing with. Because while he was busy mocking her contributions in divorce court, calling her worthless, trying to steal everything she'd helped him build, Grace had a secret worth millions. A secret that was about to walk through those courthouse doors and change everything. You see, before Grace became Mrs. Sullivan, before she disappeared into being the perfect wife, she was somebody. Somebody important. Somebody brilliant. And somebody very, very valuable. Derek thought he'd erased her. He thought 15 years was enough time to make a woman forget who she was. He was wrong. This is the story of a woman who woke up, who remembered, and who watched her arrogant CEO husband freeze in absolute shock when a billionaire arrived to pick her up. Stay with me, because what happens next? Derek never saw it coming. You were essentially a housewife who played with paintings, Grace. Let's not pretend otherwise. Derek's voice echoed through the courthouse hallway. Grace Sullivan pressed her hand against the cold marble wall. Her wedding ring caught the fluorescent light. 15 years of marriage reduced to that one sentence. Are you coming? Robert Hastings, her attorney, stood by the conference room door. Grace nodded. She couldn't speak yet. Her throat felt tight. The conference room smelled like lemon polish and old coffee. Derek sat at the far end of the table. His girlfriend, Amber, was beside him. She wore a red dress, tight, expensive. Everything Grace used to be before she became invisible. Good morning, Grace. Marcus Webb, Derek's attorney, didn't look up from his papers. Grace sat down. Robert placed a folder in front of her. Her hands shook as she opened it. Let's begin. Marcus slid a document across the table. We believe this settlement is more than fair. Grace read the first page. The house was valued at half its actual worth. Her contributions were listed as childcare and household management. Nothing about her career, nothing about what she gave up. This is insulting. Robert's voice was sharp. Derek leaned back in his chair. He smiled. My client has been generous. Miss Sullivan hasn't worked in 15 years. I worked every single day. Grace's voice was quiet but steady. Amber looked up from her phone. She smirked. You arranged flowers at gallery openings, Grace. Derek's tone was patronizing. You hosted dinner parties. That's not a career. I gave up my career for you. Grace's hands clenched under the table. What career? Derek laughed. You had some graduate degree. You played around with art. I built Sullivan Tech Holdings. I provided everything. Grace felt her face flush. The room tilted slightly. My client sacrificed significant professional opportunities. Robert opened his own folder. She had offers from major museums, from Christie's, from Sotheby's. Ancient history. Marcus waved his hand dismissively. We're discussing present circumstances. Mrs. Sullivan has no current income, no marketable skills. 15 years of my client's income supported her lifestyle. Her lifestyle? Robert's eyebrows rose. She managed your household, raised your children, facilitated your business relationships, for which she lived very comfortably. Derek's smile widened. The house in Westchester, the custody, the country club, the vacations she wanted for nothing. Grace stared at him. This man had shared her bed for 15 years. He'd held her when she cried. He'd promised partnership. Now he sat across from her like she was a stranger. Worse, like she was nothing. 15 years of my income supported your little hobby. Derek leaned forward. I think that's worth something, don't you? Amber giggled. She immediately tried to hide it behind her hand. Grace's chest tightened. She felt like she was drowning in air. We'll need time to review this. Robert closed the folder. This valuation is completely inaccurate. Take all the time you need, Marcus stood. But my client is prepared to move forward quickly. We'd prefer not to drag this through the courts. Derek stood. He buttoned his suit jacket, charcoal gray. She'd helped him pick it out 2 years ago. Think about the children, Grace. Derek's voice softened, fake concern. Sophie and Thomas don't need to see their parents fighting. Grace's fingernails dug into her palms. She wouldn't cry. Not here, not in front of him. Amber stood, her heels clicked on the floor. Red soled, Louboutin. Grace recognized them because she used to own the same pair. This doesn't have to be difficult. Derek moved toward the door. Just be reasonable. The door closed behind them. Derek's laughter drifted through the hallway. Grace sat perfectly still. The fluorescent lights hummed above her. The air conditioning whooshed through the vents. Her heart pounded in her ears. Grace? Robert's voice seemed far away. She looked at him. His face showed concern. This is just the opening offer. Robert touched her shoulder gently. We'll respond appropriately. Grace nodded. She gathered her purse, stood, walked out of the conference room on autopilot. The elevator was empty. Grace watched the numbers descend. 5, 4, 3, 2, ground floor. Her car was in the parking garage. Level 3. She walked past other cars. Mercedes, BMW, Tesla. All the same, all empty. Grace reached her car. A silver Volvo. Safe. Practical. The car of a woman who'd stopped being a person. She opened the door, sat in the driver's seat, put her purse on the passenger seat. The key was in her hand. She stared at it. She couldn't make herself to turn it. Grace sat there. The parking garage echoed with distant sounds. A car alarm, footsteps, an engine starting somewhere above her. She just sat, stared at the steering wheel, breathed. Her phone buzzed. A text from Derek's mother, Patricia. I hope you'll be reasonable and not drag this out. Think of the children. Grace locked her phone. She set it face down. She looked at her hands. 40 years old, wedding ring still on her left hand. When had she stopped recognizing them? The parking garage was cool. The air smelled like exhaust and concrete. Grace could taste metal on her tongue. 5 minutes passed, then 10. She didn't move. Finally, her hand reached for her purse. She needed her water bottle. Her fingers touched something else instead. An envelope. Unmarked. Not hers. Grace pulled it out. White, standard size, unsealed. She opened it with shaking hands. Photographs spilled onto her lap. 8 of them. All of Derek, with different women, not just Amber. Different women at different times. Restaurants, hotels. One at their lake house 2 summers ago. Each photo was dated, stamped in the corner. Professional quality. The earliest one was from 8 years ago. Grace's hands went numb. The photos scattered across her lap. 8 years. He'd been cheating for 8 years, maybe longer, while she'd been raising their children. While she'd been hosting his business dinners. While she'd been becoming invisible for him. Grace gathered the photos, put them back in the envelope, placed it in her purse. Her hands found the car key again. This time she turned it. The engine started. Grace backed out of the parking space, drove toward the exit. The sun was bright outside the garage. She squinted, fumbled for her sunglasses. Maya. She needed to see Maya. Grace merged into traffic. Her mind felt blank and full at the same time. The radio played something upbeat. She turned it off. The silence was better. She could think in silence. No, she couldn't think at all. That was the problem. Grace drove on autopilot. Left turn, right turn, straight through the intersection. Maya's office was downtown, 20 minutes away. Traffic was light, 11:30 in the morning. Most people were at work. Most people had jobs, had careers, had identities beyond being someone's wife. Grace pulled into the parking lot of Maya's building. She texted her friend, "Are you free? I need you." The response came immediately. "Come up, I'm between clients." Maya Harrison had been Grace's friend since college. 20 years of friendship. Maya had watched Grace fall in love with Derek, had been in the wedding, had held Grace's hand when Sophie was born. Maya had also been the one to say, 2 years ago, "Are you happy?" Grace hadn't answered that question, not truthfully. The elevator to Maya's floor took forever. Grace watched the numbers climb. 3, 4, 5, 6. Maya was waiting in the doorway of her office. She took one look at Grace's face and pulled her inside. "What happened?" Grace handed her the settlement offer, then the envelope of photographs. Maya read in silence, looked at the photos. Her jaw tightened. "That son of a bitch." Grace sat down on the leather couch. She felt hollowed out, like someone had scooped out her insides and left just the shell. 8 years, Maya, maybe more. Maya sat beside her. Grace, this changes things. Does it? Grace's voice was flat. He's already destroying me in court. He's already erased 15 years of my life. What difference does this make? It proves character. It proves deception. Maya flipped me through the photos again. Who gave you these? I don't know. They were in my car. Someone wants you to have ammunition. Maya's lawyer brain was working. Someone with resources. These are professional surveillance photos. Grace leaned back. The ceiling was white, smooth, unmarked. He called my career a hobby, Maya. I know. He said I was essentially a housewife who played with paintings. I know, honey. And maybe he's right. Grace's voice cracked. What do I have? No job, no income, no identity except his wife. His ex-wife now. Stop. Maya's voice was firm. You have a graduate degree, you have expertise, you have 15 years of unpaid labor that enabled his success. Grace closed her eyes. I can't remember who I was before him. Then we'll figure out who you are now. Grace opened her eyes. Maya's face was fierce, loyal, angry on her behalf. I need to pick up the kids at 3. Okay. Maya squeezed her hand. But first, we're making copies of everything. These photos, this settlement, all of it. Grace nodded. She felt numb. The numbness was better than the alternative. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Patricia. Derek tells me you were difficult today. That's not helpful, Grace. Grace showed Maya the text. Block her. Maya's tone left no room for argument. You don't need that in your life right now. But Grace didn't block the number. She just turned her phone face down again. Through Maya's office window, the city stretched out below. People were living their lives, going to lunch, going to meetings, being people with purposes. Grace wondered when she'd stopped being one of them. The photocopier hummed in Maya's office. Grace watched the green light scan back and forth. Each pass captured another piece of evidence, another proof of Derek's betrayal. Coffee? Maya held up a mug. Please. Grace's voice sounded hollow even to herself. The coffee was hot, strong. Grace wrapped both hands around the mug. The warmth helped. She could feel her hands again. Maya spread the papers across her desk. The settlement offer, the photographs, her own notes. Okay, let's look at this objectively. Maya put on her reading glasses. They valued the house at $1.2 million. Current market value, 2.4, maybe more. Grace had checked recently, just in case. And the company valuation? He's claiming $15 million. Grace set down her coffee. But that's impossible. Sullivan Tech Holdings has government contracts. They're worth at least $40 million. Maya made notes. How do you know that? I helped negotiate 2 of those contracts. Grace's voice grew stronger. I entertained the procurement officers. I researched their backgrounds. I made sure Derek knew exactly what to say and when to say it. But that's not listed anywhere in his documentation. No. Grace felt a familiar tightness in her chest. It never is. Maya leaned back. Tell me how this started. How did you go from rising curator to invisible wife? Grace closed her eyes. The memories hurt. They were sharp and clear and painful. I met him at a gallery opening. 16 years ago, I was 24, curating my first major exhibition, Contemporary Women Artists. Maya waited. She was good at waiting. He was there with clients, tech startup guys. He approached me during the reception, said he'd never understood modern art before, but I made it make sense. Classic line. I know that now. Grace opened her eyes. Then I thought he was genuinely interested in the art, in me. The memory played like a film. Derek in a navy suit, expensive but not flashy, asking intelligent questions, making her laugh, getting her number. He pursued me aggressively. Flowers at the museum, lunch deliveries, texts every morning. He made me feel like the most important person in his world. Love bombing, Maya said quietly. I didn't know the term then. Grace picked up her coffee again. We got married a year later. I was 25. He was 29. His company was growing. Everything felt possible. Grace remembered the wedding, small, elegant. Her parents had flown in from Ohio. Derek's family had been cool but polite. Patricia had made one comment. "So young, are you sure you want to tie yourself down?" Grace had thought Patricia was talking to Derek. Later, she realized the question was directed at her. Year 3, Sophie was 2. I got a call from the Metropolitan Museum, Director of Contemporary Collections. Dream job, 6-figure salary. Maya leaned forward. What happened? Derek was excited at first. Then he did the math, my hours, Sophie's daycare, his travel schedule. Grace's voice went flat. He sat me down, very serious, very concerned. He said, "Can you really do both, be a good mother and chase this career?" He made it sound like a choice. It was a choice. He just made sure there was only one right answer. Grace set down her coffee. Her hands were shaking again. He said he'd support whatever I decided. But his face, his tone, everything told me what the right decision was. Maya made more notes. Her pen moved quickly across the paper. I turned it down. Derek threw me a party. He called it my choosing family first celebration. Like I'd won something instead of lost everything. The memory of that party made Grace's stomach turn. All of Derek's friends, his business partners, everyone congratulating her on being such a dedicated mother, such a supportive wife. No one asked if she was okay. No one noticed she drank too much wine and excused herself to cry in the bathroom. Year 5. Thomas was a baby. I mentioned going back to work part-time, maybe consulting. And? Derek got this look, disappointed, hurt. He said, "The kids need you. Don't be selfish, Grace." Grace's voice hardened. Selfish. That was his word. Like wanting a career was abandoning my children. Maya's jaw tightened, but she stayed silent. Year 8, I was going crazy at home. I started a consulting business, authentication services for small galleries. I worked during school hours. Well, that sounds reasonable. Derek thought so too, as long as it didn't interfere with family, as long as dinner was on the table, as long as I was available for his business trips and dinner parties. Grace stood. She needed to move. I had a website, business cards, 3 clients. What happened? Derek's mother called me one day. She'd seen my website. She said it looked unprofessional, that it reflected poorly on Derek's success, that people might think he couldn't support his family. Grace walked to Maya's window. The city below was oblivious to her pain. I took down the website. I let the clients go. I told myself it was temporary, that I'd start again when the kids were older. But you never did. No. Grace pressed her forehead against the cool glass. Year 10, year 12, year 15. I became the woman who organized charity galas, who knew everyone's name at Derek's company, who could talk wine with investors and sports with executives. You became an asset. I became his employee, except employees get paid. Grace turned around. Every joint decision we made was really his decision. Where we lived, where the kids went to school, what car I drove, what friends I saw. Maya was watching her carefully. Did you ever say no? I tried once, year 13. Derek wanted to buy the lake house. I said we should invest the money instead, put it aside for the kids' education. What happened? He bought the lake house anyway. He said I didn't understand finances, that he knew better, that I should trust him. Grace's voice dropped, and I did, because what choice did I have? I had no money of my own, no career to fall back on, no identity beyond being Mrs. Derek Sullivan. Maya stood. She walked over and hugged Grace hard. I let him erase me. Grace's voice was muffled against Maya's shoulder. One choice at a time, one compromise at a time, until there was nothing left. You didn't let him do anything. He was systematically isolating and controlling you. Maya pulled back. That's abuse, Grace. The word hung in the air. Abuse. Grace had never thought of it that way. Derek never hit her, never screamed. He was always so reasonable, so concerned, so loving. I wasn't being supportive. I was being erased. One choice at a time. Maya squeezed her shoulders. We're going to fix this, I promise you. Grace's phone buzzed, another text from Patricia. I hope you're thinking clearly. Derek's been very generous. Don't throw that away. Grace showed Maya. She's in on it. Maya's eyes narrowed. She's working with him to pressure you. Of course she is. She's his mother. She's also breaking ethical boundaries. Maya took a photo of the text. Keep everything, every text, every call, every message. It's all evidence. Grace nodded numbly. Evidence. Her marriage had become a court case. Her life had become discovery. Everything she'd built was being torn apart and examined and found worthless. I need to go. Grace checked the time. 2:15. The kids. Okay. Maya walked her to the door. But Grace, do me a favor tonight. What? Go through your old things, your graduate work, your thesis. Remind yourself who you were before Derek. Grace promised she would. But as she rode the elevator down, she wondered if that woman even existed anymore. The parking garage was dim after Maya's bright office. Grace's footsteps echoed. Her car was where she'd left it. The envelope of photos was still in her purse. She drove to the kids' school, Westchester Prep. Private, expensive. Derek had insisted. Other mothers were already waiting. Grace recognized most of them. Lisa Donovan, Jennifer Wu, Catherine Morrison. They all knew each other. They all knew about the divorce. Grace, Lisa waved. Her smile was pitying. Grace waved back but stayed in her car. She couldn't make small talk, not today. Sophie emerged first, 14 years old, long dark hair like Grace used to have. She wore her school uniform with calculated dishevelment. Cool but not trying too hard. Thomas came next, 12, shorter than his sister. He had Derek's eyes but Grace's smile. They climbed into the car, Sophie in front, Thomas in back. How was school? Grace tried to sound normal. Fine. Sophie didn't look up from her phone. We dissected a frog. Thomas sounded excited. Grace drove home on autopilot. The house was in Riverside, 4 bedrooms, big yard, perfect neighborhood, the American dream. It felt like a museum now, beautiful and cold and full of things that didn't belong to her anymore. The kids disappeared to their rooms. Grace stood in the kitchen, marble counters, stainless steel appliances, everything spotless because she kept it that way. She made herself go to the basement. The storage room was in the back, boxes stacked floor to ceiling, Christmas decorations, old toys, baby clothes she'd saved for some reason. Her old life was in the corner, 3 boxes labeled Grace University. Grace pulled them down. Dust made her sneeze. She opened the first box. Books, art history texts, catalogs from exhibitions she'd studied. Her hands trembled as she touched them. The second box held papers, essays, research, notes in her own handwriting from 15 years ago. The third box, the thesis. Grace lifted it out carefully. 200 pages, bound, professional. The title in black letters, Algorithmic Authentication, Artificial Intelligence Applications in Art Forgery Detection. She'd forgotten, or maybe she'd made herself forget. Grace carried the thesis upstairs. She sat at the kitchen table, read the first page. The work was good, really good. She could see that even now. The algorithm she'd developed used pattern recognition and machine learning to detect forgeries. It was revolutionary for 2009. Grace pulled out her laptop, typed her maiden name into Google Scholar. Grace Mitchell. 847 citations appeared. Her breath caught. 847 times other researchers had referenced her work, used her algorithm, built on her foundation. She clicked through them. Tech companies, museums, authentication services, all using versions of what she'd created. She'd never known. In 15 years, she'd never thought to check. She'd buried this part of herself so deep she'd forgotten it existed. Grace searched for recent applications. Her algorithm was being used in AI authentication software. The industry was worth millions, maybe more, and she'd walked away from it. For Derek, for marriage, for children who were now teenagers hiding in their rooms. Grace closed her laptop. She sat in her perfect kitchen in her perfect house. She was 40 years old. She had no job, no income, no identity, but she'd been cited 847 times. That had to mean something, didn't it? Her phone buzzed. An email notification. She almost ignored it. Then she saw the sender, her old university account. She'd forgotten she even had it. Grace opened her email app, logged into the account she hadn't checked in over a decade. 3,000 unread emails. Most were spam, department newsletters, alumni updates. But one from 5 years ago caught her eye. The subject line, Partnership Opportunity, Your Authentication Research. The sender, James Thornton. Grace's heart stopped. Professor Thornton, her graduate advisor. He'd been brilliant, supportive. He'd called her thesis revolutionary. She opened the email with shaking hands. Dear Grace, I hope this message finds you well. I've been following the applications of your authentication algorithm in the commercial sector. Several companies have approached me about potential partnerships to further develop this technology. I immediately thought of you as the ideal collaborator. Would you be interested in discussing a joint venture? The commercial potential is significant. I'd love to reconnect and explore possibilities. Please contact me at your earliest convenience. Best regards, James Thornton. The email was dated 5 years ago, February 14th, Valentine's Day. Grace checked her personal email from that time. Nothing. No forwarded message. No mention of it. Derek had access to her university email. She'd given him the password years ago when he'd needed to send something from her account. He'd never told her about this email. Grace's hands started shaking. Then her whole body. Derek had intercepted this message. He'd seen a partnership offer, commercial potential, significant opportunity, and he'd kept it from her. For 5 years, this email had sat unread, while she'd been organizing his life, raising his children, becoming invisible. Grace stood, walked to the window, stared out at the perfect lawn. She'd been erased, systematically, deliberately, completely. But the evidence was all there, the citations, the email, the photographs. Derek hadn't just failed to see her value, he'd actively hidden it from her. Grace pulled out her phone. She needed to tell Maya. She needed to document everything. As she unlocked her screen, another text appeared. Patricia again. Derek mentioned you found some photographs. I hope you're not planning to use those. Think about Sophie and Thomas. They don't need to see their father dragged through the mud. Grace stared at the message. How did Patricia know about the photos? Grace hadn't told anyone except Maya. Derek must have figured out someone was surveilling him. He'd told his mother. They were preparing their defense. They were working together to pressure her, to silence her. Grace typed a response, then deleted it. Typed again, deleted again. Finally, she wrote, I'm thinking about Sophie and Thomas. That's all I've ever done. Maybe it's time their father did the same. She hit send before she could second guess herself. Grace went back to her laptop, opened her old university email, found James Thornton's original message, clicked reply. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. What could she even say? 5 years had passed. He'd probably moved on, found another partner, forgotten about her entirely. But she typed anyway. Dear Professor Thornton, I apologize for the delayed response. I only just discovered your email. I would very much like to discuss the partnership opportunity if it's still available. I realize 5 years is an inexcusable delay. If you're willing to consider rekindling this conversation, please let me know. Best regards, Grace Sullivan. She hit send before she lost her nerve. The email vanished into the void. Grace closed her laptop. Upstairs, she could hear Sophie's music. Thomas was playing video games. Normal teenage sounds in a house that felt anything but normal. Grace looked around her kitchen. She'd chosen the backsplash, the cabinet hardware, the pendant lights. She'd made this house a home. But it wasn't her home. It was Derek's. It always had been. Her phone buzzed. A text from Maya. Are you okay? Call me if you need anything. Grace texted back. Found something. Old email from grad school professor about partnership. Derek never told me. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, that bastard, document everything. We'll use it. Grace set down her phone. She went to the refrigerator, started pulling out ingredients for dinner. Chicken, Vegetables, rice, the same meal she'd made 1,000 times. Her hands moved automatically. Chop, season, heat the pan. She didn't need to think. That was the problem. She'd stopped thinking years ago. She'd become muscle memory, a series of automatic responses to someone else's needs. Grace stirred the rice, watched the water boil, the kitchen filled with steam. Sophie came downstairs. "What's for dinner? Chicken and rice?" "Again?" Sophie's tone was exasperated. Grace looked at her daughter. When had she become this person? This teenager who expected meals to appear and clothes to be clean and life to be convenient? Yes, again. Sophie rolled her eyes, went back upstairs. Grace finished cooking, set the table, called the kids down. Thomas appeared first. He helped himself to chicken without being asked. Sophie came down last. She picked at her food. "Dad says he might take us to the lake house this weekend." Sophie didn't look at Grace. "Did he?" "He says you're making the divorce difficult." Grace set down her fork. "Is that what he says?" "Are you?" Sophie's eyes were accusing. "Dad says you could just agree to his offer and this would all be over." "Your father's offer is unfair. He says you're being greedy." Sophie pushed rice around her plate. Thomas was quiet. He kept his eyes on his food. Grace took a breath. "What your father and I are going through is between adults. You don't need to worry about it." "But I do worry." Sophie's voice rose. "Everyone at school is talking about it. Jennifer's mom told her you're trying to take all of Dad's money." "That's not true." "Then why are you fighting?" Grace looked at her daughter, 14 years old, beautiful, smart, growing up in a world where her mother was the villain. "I'm fighting for what's fair." "Dad's being fair. He said you can keep the house." Grace felt something crack inside her. "Go to your room, Sophie." "What? Why, I didn't do anything." "Go, now." Sophie threw down her napkin, stomped upstairs, her door slammed. Thomas looked at Grace. His eyes were worried. "Are you okay, Mom?" "I'm fine, honey." "You don't seem fine." Grace reached across the table, squeezed his hand. "I'm working on it." After dinner, Grace cleaned the kitchen alone, loaded the dishwasher, wiped the counters, put away the leftovers, everything in its place, everything perfect, everything meaningless. She went upstairs, past Sophie's closed door, past Thomas's room where he was on his computer. Her own room felt wrong. She'd been sleeping in the guest room since Derek moved out. The master bedroom was too empty, too full of memories. Grace changed into pajamas, brushed her teeth, washed her face. The woman in the mirror looked tired, worn down, nothing like the bright-eyed 24-year-old she'd been once. Grace went to her laptop, checked her email. Probably too soon to expect a response from James Thornton. But there was a new message, sent 20 minutes ago. "Grace Sullivan, I've been hoping to hear from you for 15 years. Let's talk. When are you free, James?" Grace read the message 3 times, then 4, then 5. 15 years. He'd been hoping to hear from her for 15 years. She replied immediately. "I'm free most days. Would this week work?" The response came within minutes. "Tomorrow, 2 o'clock. Video call?" Grace's heart pounded. Perfect. She closed her laptop, sat on the bed, stared at the wall. Tomorrow. She was talking to James Thornton tomorrow. About her research. About partnership. About the life she'd left behind. Grace lay down, pulled the covers up, closed her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she didn't cry herself to sleep. Instead, she felt something else. Something small and fragile and almost forgotten. Hope. Grace woke at 5 in the morning. The house was dark and quiet. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Her conversation with James Thornton was 9 hours away. 9 hours to remember who she used to be. Grace got up, made coffee, carried her laptop to the kitchen table. Outside, the sky was starting to lighten. Dawn came slowly in November. She opened her old thesis again, read through the methodology, the algorithm development, the testing protocols. It was good work. She could see that clearly now. Why hadn't she seen it before? Because Derek told her it was just a hobby, a phase, something to be outgrown. Grace pulled out a notebook, started making notes. What had changed in 15 years? What new technologies existed? How could her original algorithm be improved? Her mind felt rusty at first, like a muscle that hadn't been used in too long. But gradually ideas started flowing. Connections formed. Problems identified solutions. She was still writing when Sophie came downstairs at 6:30. Her daughter stopped in the doorway. "What are you doing?" "Working." Grace didn't look up. "On what?" "Research from my graduate studies." Sophie poured cereal at Billionaire. "I didn't know you did research." "I did a lot of things before I had you." Grace's tone was sharper than intended. Sophie flinched. Grace immediately felt guilty. This wasn't Sophie's fault. None of it was Sophie's fault. "I'm sorry, honey, I didn't mean it that way." "Whatever." Sophie took her bowl upstairs. Grace closed her eyes. She was ruining everything. Her marriage. Her relationship with her daughter. Herself. Thomas appeared next. He was quieter. He made toast, sat next to Grace. "What are you working on?" Grace showed him the thesis. "I studied how computers can tell if paintings are real or fake." "That's cool." Thomas seemed genuinely interested. "Like using AI?" "Exactly like using AI, before AI was mainstream." "Can I read it?" Grace handed him the thesis. Thomas flipped through pages. He wouldn't understand most of it, but he was trying. That meant something. "You're really smart, Mom." Grace's throat tightened. "Thank you, sweetheart. Dad always talks about his work, but I never knew you did stuff like this." Grace touched his cheek. "I used to." "Are you going to again?" "I'm working on it." After the kids left for school, Grace went to the storage room again. She pulled out all 3 boxes, carried them upstairs, spread everything across the dining room table. Papers, articles, correspondence with other researchers, conference presentations she'd given, everything she'd been. Grace found her old laptop from graduate school. It took forever to boot up. The battery was dead. She plugged it in, waited. When it finally loaded, Grace navigated to her old files. Photos of herself at conferences, young, confident, smiling. She barely recognized that woman. There were emails too, from James Thornton, from other professors, from museum curators interested in her work, from tech companies asking if she wanted to interview. Grace had forgotten all of this, or buried it, or been told to forget it so many times she'd actually managed to. She found a folder labeled Potential Careers. Inside were job offers, Metropolitan Museum, Smithsonian, Christie's Auction House. 3 different Silicon Valley startups, every single one dated from 15 to 13 years ago. Right before and after Sophie was born, Grace opened each offer letter, read the salaries, the benefits, the opportunities. She'd turned them all down. For Derek, for family, for the right thing to do. Except it wasn't right. It was just what Derek wanted. Grace's phone alarm went off. 1:30, 30 minutes until her video call with James. She closed the laptop, went to the bathroom, fixed her hair, put on makeup for the first time in weeks, changed into a real shirt instead of a sweatshirt. The woman in the mirror looked more alive. Still tired, still worn, but alive. Grace set up her laptop in her home office. The room was small. She decorated it years ago when she tried to start consulting. Then stopped using it when Derek made her feel guilty about having space of her own. 2:00. Grace opened the video call link. Her hands shook. The screen connected. James Thornton appeared. He'd aged, gray hair now instead of dark brown, glasses, lines around his eyes, but the same kind of expression, the same intelligent gaze. "Grace." His smile was genuine. "It's so good to see you." "Professor Thornton." Grace's voice wobbled. "I'm so sorry about the delay in responding." "Please call me James. We're colleagues, not professor and student anymore." He leaned forward. "Grace, I've been trying to find you for years." "You have?" "Your work was foundational, revolutionary. I built my entire company on the principles you developed." Grace blinked. "Your company?" "Thorn AI. We develop authentication software for art, antiquities, and collectibles." James pulled up a screen share. "Look, this is our core algorithm. See the pattern recognition matrix? That's yours. The machine learning protocol? That's your thesis." Grace stared at the screen. It was her work. Refined, expanded, improved, but fundamentally hers. I've been trying to track you down because I wanted to bring you in as a partner, not as an employee, as a co-founder. You deserve equity in what we've built. Grace's vision blurred. She wasn't sure if she was going to laugh or cry. I sent you multiple emails. I called your old number. I even reached out to the university, but they said your records were private. I never got your emails. Grace's voice was barely a whisper. I mean, I got one, today, from 5 years ago, but I didn't know about it until yesterday. James frowned. How is that possible? Grace told him about Derek, about giving him access to her old university account, about the systematic erasure of her professional identity. James's face darkened as she spoke. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Grace, may I ask you a question? Of course. What happened to you? The question broke something inside her. Grace felt tears on her face. She couldn't stop them. I got married. I had children. I thought I was making the right choices. I thought being a good wife and mother meant sacrificing myself. I thought that's what love was. And now I'm getting divorced and discovering that the man I gave everything to deliberately hid opportunities from me, made me small, made me nothing. James's expression was compassionate. You were never nothing. Your work is being cited in papers published this year. Your algorithm is taught in graduate programs. You changed the field, Grace. I didn't change anything. I walked away. You were 25 years old. You made choices that made sense at the time with the information you had. James removed his glasses, cleaned them, put them back on. But you're not 25 anymore. You're not trapped anymore. What do you want to do now? Grace looked at her hands, 40 years old, wedding ring still on her finger. She twisted it absently. I don't know who I am without him. Then maybe it's time to find out. Grace wiped her eyes. I'm in the middle of a divorce. I have 2 teenage children. I haven't worked in 15 years. You can't just what? Use your mind. Reclaim your expertise. Remember that you're a brilliant researcher who changed an entire field. It's been too long. The technology has evolved. I'm behind, so catch up. James's tone was matter of fact. You have one of the best analytical minds I've ever worked with. You learned all of this once. You can learn it again. Why do you care? The question came out more sharply than Grace intended. Why now, after 15 years? Because I owe you. My company is built on your work. I've made millions from your research. James leaned back. And because I knew that woman in graduate school. She was unstoppable. I'd like to see her again. Grace laughed. It came out half sob. She's gone. Is she, or is she just buried? They talked for another hour. James showed her the current state of authentication technology, the gaps in the market, the opportunities for innovation. Grace's mind started working again, seeing patterns, identifying problems, proposing solutions. It felt like coming home. When the call ended, Grace sat in silence. The house was quiet. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows. She looked around her office. This space had been Derek's idea, a little room where she could pursue her hobbies, keep busy, stay out of the way. Grace stood, walked through the house, really looked at it for the first time in years. Everything was Derek's choice. The paint colors, the furniture, the art on the walls, even the books on the shelves were what looked good, not what she wanted to read. She'd been living in someone else's life, wearing someone else's skin, being someone else's version of herself. Grace went back downstairs, to the dining room where she'd spread out all her old work. She picked up a paper she'd written, an analysis of Vermeer forgeries. She'd been so passionate about this. Why had she stopped? Because Derek said it didn't matter. Because Derek said her time was better spent on the family. Because Derek said a lot of things, and she'd believed all of them. Grace pulled out her phone, opened Google, searched her maiden name plus authentication algorithm. Pages of results appeared. Her thesis cited again and again, papers building on her work, companies using her methods, an entire field she'd helped create. She'd Googled her herself earlier. Grace Sullivan. Nothing came up. No professional presence. No academic record. Nothing. But Grace Mitchell? Grace Mitchell was everywhere. She'd been cited 847 times. Her work was foundational. She was somebody. She was somebody before Derek. She'd just forgotten. Grace spent the rest of the afternoon reading, catching up. 15 years of advances in artificial intelligence, machine learning, authentication technology. It was overwhelming, but also thrilling. Her brain felt alive, engaged, useful. At 3:30, her phone buzzed. Maya. How did it go? He wants me to partner with him. Co-founder, equity, the whole thing. Maya screamed, actually screamed. Grace, this is amazing. I haven't said yes. Why not? Because I'm 40 years old. I'm getting divorced. I have kids. I'm out of practice. I'm scared. Grace felt tears again. What if I'm not good enough anymore? What if you are? Maya's voice was firm. What about if you're better than before? What if everything you've been through makes you stronger, not weaker? Grace wiped her eyes. I don't know if I can do this. Yes, you can, and you will, because the alternative is staying invisible, and I think we're both done with that. After they hung up, Grace heard the front door open. The kids were home. Sophie appeared in the dining room doorway. She looked at all the papers spread across the table. What is all this? My old work, from graduate school. Sophie picked up the thesis, flipped through pages. Did you really write this? I did. It looks really hard. It was, but I loved it. Sophie set it down carefully. Why did you stop? Grace looked at her daughter. How honest should she be? How much could a 14-year-old understand? I thought I had to choose. Between being your mother and being myself, I chose you. But you didn't have to choose, did you? No, but I didn't know that then. Sophie sat down. Dad says you're being difficult about the divorce. Your father and I have different ideas about fair. He says you're trying to take his money. Grace took a breath. I'm trying to get recognized for what I contributed. For 15 years, I supported his career, made his success possible. Now he's saying I did nothing. That's not fair. Sophie was quiet. Jennifer's mom said you were basically a housewife. Do you think that's all I was? Sophie looked at the thesis, at the papers, at all the evidence of a life Grace had lived before. No, Sophie said quietly. I don't think that's all you were. Grace reached across the table, took her daughter's hand. Sophie didn't pull away. I'm sorry you're in the middle of this. It sucks. I know. But Mom, Sophie squeezed her hand, I'm glad you're fighting, even if it's hard. I'm glad you're not just letting him win. Grace's throat tightened. Thank you, sweetheart. After dinner, after the kids went to bed, Grace sat alone in her office. She opened her email, composed a message to James. I need time. This divorce, my children. I can't just jump into a partnership right now, but I'm interested. Very interested. Can we stay in touch while I sort out my life? She hit send, then immediately regretted it. Maybe she should have said yes. Maybe this was her only chance. James's response came within minutes. Take all the time you need. The offer stands. 5 years, 10 years. When you're ready, I'll be here. Your work is too valuable to rush. You're too valuable to rush. Best, James. Grace read the message 3 times. You're too valuable to rush. When was the last time someone had said she was valuable? When had Derek ever made her feel like she mattered? Grace closed her laptop, looked around her small office. She'd been trying to get back to who she was before Derek, that bright-eyed 24-year-old graduate student. But maybe that wasn't the goal. Maybe the goal was to become someone new, someone who had survived, someone who had woken up, someone who had fought back. Maybe the goal was to become the woman she was supposed to be all along. Grace turned off the light, went upstairs, lay in bed in the dark. Tomorrow she had a deposition. Derek's lawyers were going to try to tear her apart, make her look desperate, vindictive, worthless. But she wasn't worthless. She'd been cited 847 times. She'd changed an entire field. She was somebody. She'd just forgotten for a while. Grace closed her eyes. For the second night in a row, she didn't cry herself to sleep. Instead, she planned what she'd say at the deposition, how she'd defend herself, how she'd show them exactly what she was worth. Derek had spent 15 years making her invisible, Grace was done being invisible. The law office smelled like coffee and furniture polish. Grace sat in a leather chair that made small, squeaking sounds every time she moved. Across the table, Marcus Webb shuffled papers. Derek sat next to him, checking his phone. Robert Hastings reviewed his notes beside Grace. Remember, answer only what's asked. Don't volunteer information. Stay calm. Grace nodded. Her hands were steady. She'd barely slept, but she felt clear-headed, sharp. Marcus looked up. Shall we begin? The court reporter settled into position, fingers on the stenotype machine. Ready. Please state your full name for the record. Grace Elizabeth Sullivan. And you were married to Derek Sullivan on June 15th, 2009? Yes. How long have you been separated? 8 months. Marcus made notes. During your marriage, were you employed? No. Did you seek employment? No. Why not? Grace took a breath. My husband and I agreed that I would focus on raising our children and managing our household. So this was a joint decision? It was presented as one. Marcus's eyebrows rose. Presented as one? What does that mean? It means my husband expressed preferences that made other choices difficult. Did he forbid you from working? No. Did he threaten you? No. Did he prevent you from seeking employment? Grace paused. How to explain something so subtle, so insidious? He made it clear that working outside the home would be selfish, that the children needed me, that his career required my full support. But he didn't actually stop you. He didn't need to. Derek shifted in his seat. Marcus continued. Mrs. Sullivan, isn't it true that you enjoyed a very comfortable lifestyle during your marriage? Yes. You lived in a 4-bedroom home in Riverside? Yes. You drove a luxury vehicle? Yes. You belonged to the country club? Yes. You took regular to vacations? Yes. Marcus leaned back. So you had everything you needed. I had everything except my own identity. Objection, Marcus frowned. Non-responsive. Sustained, Robert nodded to Grace. Just answer the question. Marcus tried again. Mrs. Sullivan, during your marriage, did you have any marketable skills? This was the moment. Grace looked at Marcus directly. Yes, I have a graduate degree in art history with specialization in authentication technology. I have a thesis that's foundational to current AI authentication systems. I have 15 years of executive household management, financial planning, and strategic partnership development. Marcus looked surprised. Partnership development? Yes. Every client my husband entertained learned to trust him over dinners I planned, conversations I facilitated, and connections I made. I was his unpaid chief operating officer of lifestyle management. Derek's face went red. He leaned over to whisper to Marcus. Mrs. Sullivan. Marcus's tone hardened. You arrange dinner parties. That's hardly executive experience. I researched clients' backgrounds, interests, and preferences. I created environments conducive to business relationships. I positioned my husband as cultured, connected, and trustworthy. Several of his major contracts resulted directly from relationships I built. Robert hid a smile. Marcus flipped through papers. You mentioned a thesis from graduate school? Yes. That was 15 years ago. The work is still being cited, 847 times actually. You memorized that number? I checked yesterday. Derek whispered to Marcus again, more urgently this time. Mrs. Sullivan, even if we accept your thesis had some academic value, what practical application does it have? Authentication technology is a multi-million-dollar industry. My algorithm forms the basis for several commercial authentication systems currently in use. Do you have proof of this? Robert slid a folder across the table. Citations, expert testimony, and correspondence from Professor James Thornton of Thorn AI confirming the commercial applications of my client's research. Marcus opened the folder. His expression shifted. Who is James Thornton? My former graduate advisor, currently CEO of Thorn AI, a leading authentication technology company. And when did you reconnect with Professor Thornton? 2 days ago. Marcus pounced. 2 days, very convenient timing. Just as you're negotiating your divorce settlement. I only recently discovered his attempts to contact me were intercepted. Derek stood up suddenly. Can we take a break? Marcus looked annoyed but nodded. 15 minutes. Grace followed Robert into the hallway. Her heart was pounding, but she felt strong, powerful. That was excellent. Robert squeezed her shoulder. You're doing great. He's trying to make it look like I'm lying about James. Let him try. We have documentation, emails, timestamps. He can't prove anything suspicious. Through the conference room window, Grace could see Derek arguing with Marcus. Derek's face was furious. His hands gesticulated wildly. He knew. He knew she was telling the truth. He knew he'd underestimated her. When they reconvened, Marcus's approach had changed, more aggressive, more personal. Mrs. Sullivan, isn't it true you gave your husband access to your university email account? Yes, years ago. Why? He needed to send something from my account for tax purposes. And you never changed the password? No. So he had access for years? Yes. Did you ever check that account? No. Why not? Grace chose her words carefully. Because I was told my academic career was over. That I should focus on family. That looking backward was unproductive. Who told you that? Grace looked directly at Derek. My husband. Derek's jaw clenched. Marcus switched tactics. Mrs. Sullivan, you claim you contributed to your husband's business success. Can you provide specific examples? Yes. In 2014, Derek was pursuing a contract with Harrison Industries. I researched the CEO, Michael Harrison, discovered he was an art collector, passionate about Renaissance paintings. I arranged a private viewing at a local gallery, facilitated a 3-hour conversation about Caravaggio. Derek secured the contract 2 weeks later. It was worth $12 million. Derek's eyes widened. He'd forgotten, or he'd never connected the dots. In 2016, Derek needed to impress investors from Japan. I spent 2 weeks researching Japanese business culture, arranged a traditional kaiseki dinner, studied appropriate gift-giving protocols. The investors committed $80 million. Marcus was writing rapidly. How do you remember these specific details? Because I planned them. I executed them. I made them possible, while my husband took credit. That's not fair, Derek's voice cut through the room. I did the work. You just helped with the social aspects. Everyone turned to look at him. Marcus put a hand on Derek's arm, but Derek shook it off. Grace, you're making it sound like you built my company. I built it. Me. My vision. My work. With my support. With my sacrifice. With my unpaid labor. Grace's voice was steel. I gave up my career for yours. I made you look good. I made you successful. And now you're trying to pretend I did nothing. You did do nothing. You arranged parties. You played hostess. That's not a career. Robert started to object, but Grace held up her hand. She wanted to hear this. She needed Derek to say it out loud. For 15 years, I subordinated my needs to yours. I turned down job offers. I buried my ambitions. I became invisible so you could shine. Nobody made you invisible. You chose to be a mother. You chose to support the family. You made those choices for me. Every time I suggested working, you made me feel guilty. Every time I wanted to pursue my own interests, you called me selfish. That's not true. It's completely true. Grace stood. You intercepted emails from James Thornton. You hid partnership opportunities from me. You systematically eliminated every possibility of me having an identity outside of being your wife. I was protecting you. From what? From success? From financial independence? From having value of my own? Marcus tried to interrupt. Mr. Sullivan, please. She's twisting everything. Derek's face was purple. I provided for her. I gave her everything, and now she's trying to destroy me in divorce court. I'm not trying to destroy you. Grace's voice was eerily calm. I'm trying to get recognized for what I contributed. There's a difference, Begavan. Derek opened his mouth, closed it, looked at Marcus helplessly. I think we should adjourn for today. Marcus's tone was tight. Emotions are running high. Agreed. Robert gathered his papers. Grace walked out without looking back. She could hear Derek and Marcus arguing behind her. She didn't care. In the elevator, Robert laughed. That was incredible. He imploded. He couldn't help himself. Grace felt exhausted and exhilarated at the same time. He's so used to controlling the narrative, he couldn't stand hearing the truth. We'll use this, all of it. His outburst, his admission about intercepting emails, everything. Grace nodded, but she wasn't thinking about legal strategy anymore. She was thinking about Derek's face, the fury, the disbelief. He'd really thought she was nothing. He'd really believed his own lies. In the parking garage, Grace sat in her car. She couldn't drive yet. Her hands were shaking now. The adrenaline was wearing off. A young woman walked past. She glanced at Grace, stopped. "Are you okay?" Grace looked up. The woman was maybe 25. Professional clothes, concerned expression. "I just woke up from a 15-year nap." The woman looked confused but smiled. "Well, welcome back." Grace watched her walk away. Welcome back. Yes, that's exactly what this was. A return, a reawakening. Her phone rang. Maya. "How did it go?" "Derek lost his temper, admitted to intercepting my emails, basically confessed to everything." "Oh my God, that's perfect." "Is it?" Grace felt tears starting. "Maya, I just destroyed my marriage in a conference room." "No, he destroyed it years ago. You just finally showed everyone what really happened." Grace drove to Maya's office. She needed to see her friend, needed to feel less alone. Maya was waiting with wine and takeout. They sat in her office, eating Thai food and reviewing the deposition. "He's terrified." Maya read through Robert's notes. "You showed him you have value, real, monetary, professional value. His whole strategy was based on you being desperate and helpless." "I am desperate and helpless." "No, you're not. You have options now. James Thornton, your research, your expertise." Maya squeezed Grace's hand. "You're not the woman he married anymore. You're stronger now." "Am I? Because I feel like I'm falling apart." "That's the difference. You're falling apart in public. You're being honest about how hard this is. That takes more strength than pretending everything is fine." Grace ate her pad thai in silence. She didn't taste it. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Mrs. Sullivan, this is James Thornton. I hope it's okay that I got your number from your attorney. I wanted to check on you after today's deposition. If you need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out." Grace showed Maya the text. "He cares about you. He barely knows me. He knew you, the real you, before Derek erased her." Maya poured more wine. "Text him back." Grace typed slowly. "Thank you for checking. Today was difficult but necessary. I appreciate your support." James responded immediately. "You're doing the right thing. Standing up for yourself. I'm proud of you." Grace felt something crack open in her chest. When was the last time someone said they were proud of her? She drove home as dusk settled. The house was dark. The kids were at Derek's apartment for the night. Grace was alone. She walked through empty rooms, turned on lights, made tea she didn't drink. In her office, she opened her laptop, started researching current authentication technology, reading papers, catching up on 15 years of advances, her mind engaged. Problems identified solutions. Patterns emerged. She was still good at this. Maybe better than before. At midnight, Grace finally went to bed. She lay in the dark, thinking about the deposition, about Derek's face, about his fury. He'd been terrified. Good. He should be. For 15 years, she'd been terrified. Of his disapproval, of his disappointment, of losing him. Now he could feel what that was like. Grace closed her eyes. Tomorrow she'd keep fighting. Tomorrow she'd keep proving her worth. But tonight she let herself feel angry, furious, righteous in her rage. She'd earned it. The video call connected at 9 in the morning. James Thornton appeared on Grace's screen. He looked concerned. "How are you holding up?" Grace wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. "I'm okay, tired, but okay. I heard about the deposition. Your attorney mentioned it went well. Derek lost his temper, admitted to intercepting your emails." Grace set down her coffee. "So yes, it went well. If you define well as publicly destroying what's left of my marriage." "Grace, your marriage was already destroyed. You're just making sure everyone knows the truth." They talked for an hour about authentication technology, about the state of the industry, about possibilities for partnership. Grace's mind felt sharp again. Engaged, useful. I want to send you some materials. James pulled up a document. Current research papers. Industry reports. What we're working on at Thorn AI. I think you'll find it fascinating. I'd like that. Grace? James hesitated. Can I say something that might be overstepping? Of course, it also. Your thesis was revolutionary, but you know what impressed me more? Your tenacity. Your ability to see patterns no one else saw. That doesn't go away. That's who you are. He leaned forward. I know you're going through hell right now, but you're still that brilliant researcher. You're still that unstoppable woman. You just forgot for a while. Grace felt tears building. She blinked them back. Thank you. I mean it. And when you're ready, when this divorce is settled and you have breathing room, I want you to partner with me. Not because I feel sorry for you, because I need your mind. After the call ended, Grace sat in silence. The house felt very quiet, very empty. She looked at her wedding ring, twisted it absently. When had it become so loose? Had she lost weight? Or had she just been wearing it too long? Grace pulled it off, set it on the desk, stared at it. 14.7 years of marriage, reduced to a gold band with diamonds, worth maybe $10,000. What was she worth, not the ring? Her. Grace Mitchell Sullivan, former curator, former researcher, current mother, current divorcee, 847 citations. That had to be worth something, didn't it? Her phone rang. Patricia Sullivan. Grace almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Hello, Patricia. Grace, we need to talk. Patricia's voice was sharp. I'm coming over. I'd rather you didn't. I'm already in your driveway. Grace looked out the window. Patricia's silver Lexus was indeed in the driveway. She hung up without responding. The doorbell rang 3 times, insistent. Grace took her time walking to the door. Patricia stood on the porch, dressed for battle in Chanel. Her expression was severe. We need to discuss a reasonable settlement. Come in, Patricia. Grace opened the door wider. Might as well get this over with. They sat in the living room. Patricia perched on the edge of the sofa like she might catch something from casual contact. Derek is being very generous. You need to understand that. Derek is hiding assets and lying about company valuations. I understand that perfectly. Patricia's lips thinned. That's not true. My son has worked very hard for his success. With my help. You were his wife. Support is expected. Grace felt something cold settle in her chest. Support is expected, but compensation isn't? You lived very well for 15 years. I worked very hard for 15 years. I just wasn't paid. Patricia set down her purse. Grace, let me be frank. You're not going to do better than Derek's offer. You have no GA, no prospects, no real skills. The sooner you accept that, the better. I have a graduate degree in authentication technology. I have research that's still being cited. I have a partnership offer from a billionaire tech CEO. I have plenty of prospects. Patricia laughed. That James Thornton situation? Derek told me about that. Very convenient timing. Courts will see right through it. Courts will see documentation, emails, timestamps, proof that Derek intercepted partnership opportunities. You're being difficult. This is why women your age need guidance. Grace stood. I need you to leave now. Excuse me? Leave my house now. Patricia stood slowly. You're making a mistake. Derek provides well. You've lived comfortably. Perhaps it's time for gratitude. I provided comfort. I provided legitimacy. I provided unpaid labor for 15 years. Grace walked to the door, opened it. And I am grateful. I'm grateful I finally woke up. You're being hysterical. I'm not hysterical. I'm awake and angry. There's a difference. Patricia gathered her purse, walked to the door, paused. Derek told me you'd become unreasonable. I didn't believe him. I thought surely you'd see sense. Patricia's voice dropped. But I was wrong. You've changed, Grace, and not for the better. You're right. I have changed. I stopped being invisible. I stopped apologizing for existing. I stopped letting people tell me I'm worthless. Patricia left without another word. Her Lexus backed out of the driveway too fast. Grace closed the door, leaned against it. Her hands were shaking. She'd just told off her mother-in-law. She'd stood up for herself. She'd refused to back down. Why did it feel both exhilarating and terrifying? Grace went to the kitchen, made more coffee, stood at the window. The yard looked neglected. She hadn't mowed in 2 weeks. The flower beds needed weeding. Everything was falling apart. Or maybe everything had always been falling apart. She'd just been too busy performing perfection to notice. Her phone buzzed, a text from Maya. Patricia just called my office. She's threatening to influence the custody hearing. Says you're unstable. Grace typed back. Let her try. I have documentation of her intimidation tactics. Maya responded immediately. That's my girl. Don't back down. Grace set down her phone, looked around her kitchen. This house had never really been hers. Derek had chosen it. Patricia had decorated it. Grace had just maintained it. Like everything else in her life, she went to the basement, to the storage room, started pulling out boxes. Her old things, her real things, photos from college, books she'd loved. Art she'd collected before Derek told her what they should display. Grace carried everything upstairs. Started removing Derek's choices from the walls. His generic landscapes. His safe, boring prints. She hung her own art. A Rothko print she'd bought it in graduate school. A photograph from her semester in Paris. A small painting she'd found at a flea market. The house started looking different. More personal, more hers. By afternoon, Grace was exhausted. She sat on the floor surrounded by boxes and frames. Her back hurt, her arms ached, but the walls looked better, more real. Her phone rang. Robert Hastings. Grace, I have news. Derek's attorney filed a motion to fast-track the divorce. They're offering even less than before. What? Why that? Yeah. They're betting you'll fold under pressure. They think you're desperate and will take anything to make this go away. Grace felt her anger returning. They're wrong. I know, but I wanted to warn you. The court date is in 3 weeks, Marlon. They're going to fight dirty. After they hung up, Grace sat in her changing living room. 3 weeks. She had 3 weeks to prove her worth, to demonstrate her contributions, to show everyone that she was somebody. But who was she proving this to? The court? Derek? Herself? Grace pulled out her laptop, started writing everything she'd done for Derek's company. Every dinner party, every client relationship, every connection she'd facilitated. The list grew longer and longer and longer. By the time she finished, it was 15 pages long. 15 years reduced to 15 pages. Was that all it was worth? Grace saved the document, emailed it to Robert, closed her laptop. The house was getting dark. She should turn on lights, make dinner, be productive. Instead, she went to the bathroom, turned on the shower, let the water heat up. She sat on the bathroom floor, fully dressed, just listening to the water run. The sound was soothing, constant, reliable. The water didn't judge her, didn't tell her she was worthless, didn't erase her. Time passed. Grace didn't move, just sat, breathed, existed. An hour later, Sophie found her. Mom? Sophie's voice was scared. Mom, you are there, Mom, are you okay? Grace looked up. Her daughter stood in the doorway, frightened, young, vulnerable. I'm okay, sweetheart. You're just sitting on the floor. Sometimes I need to sit. Sophie sat down next to her. They sat together in silence. The shower kept running. The mirror fogged up. Grandma Patricia called me today. Sophie's voice was small. She said you're being difficult, that you're making things hard for Dad. Did she? Is that true? Grace chose her words carefully. Your father and I are negotiating fairly. Sometimes that's hard, but it's necessary. Dad says you're being greedy. I'm sure he does. Are you? Grace turned to look at her daughter. Sophie's eyes were so young, so uncertain. No, honey, I'm not being greedy. I'm being fair. There's a difference. Sophie leaned against Grace's shoulder. Everything is so messed up. I know. I hate this. Me too. They sat together until the water heater gave out. The shower turned cold. Grace stood, turned it off, helped Sophie up. Come on, let's order pizza. Can we watch a movie? Sure. They ordered pizza, watched a mindless comedy. Thomas joined them when Derek dropped him off at 8. The three of them sat together on the couch, almost like a normal family, almost like nothing had changed, except everything had changed. After the kids went to bed, Grace opened her email, a message from James. I sent over those research papers. Take your time reviewing them. No pressure. Just thought you'd be interested. Grace opened the attachments, started reading. Her brain engaged immediately. Authentication technology had advanced significantly, but there were still gaps, problems her original algorithm could solve if properly adapted. Grace made notes, drew diagrams, identified opportunities. At 2 in the morning, she finally stopped. Her eyes burned, her head hurt, but she felt alive. For the first time in years, she felt like herself. Grace went to bed, lay in the dark, thought about the deposition, about Patricia's threats, about Derek's fury. They were all trying to make her small again, invisible again, nothing again. But she wasn't nothing. She'd never been nothing. She'd just been told she was nothing. So many times she'd started to believe it. Grace closed her eyes. Tomorrow she'd keep fighting. Tomorrow she'd keep proving herself. Tomorrow she'd keep waking up. But tonight in the dark, she asked herself a question she'd been avoiding. What if I never prove anything to anyone? What if the court rules against me? What if Derek wins? Am I still worth something then? The answer came slowly, from deep inside, from the part of her that had survived everything. Yes, I'm worth something regardless. My value doesn't depend on anyone else's ability to see it. Grace fell asleep with that thought. It wasn't much, but it was something, and something was better than nothing. Grace woke at 5 in the morning, not from anxiety, from purpose. She had 3 weeks until court, 3 weeks to prepare, 3 weeks to become the person she needed to be. Grace made coffee, opened her laptop, started working through James's research papers. Her brain felt rusty at first. 15 years of disuse showed, but gradually connections formed. Patterns emerged. Problems identified solutions. She was still good at this, maybe better than before. Life had taught her things, patience, persistence, the ability to see through surface appearances to underlying truth. At 7, her phone rang, an unknown number. Hello? Grace, this is Catherine Reynolds. Grace's breath caught. Professor Reynolds, her graduate advisor. She hadn't spoken to her in over a decade. Professor Reynolds? Please, call me Catherine. I got your contact information from James Thornton. I hope that's okay. Of course, I'm just surprised. I still use your work in my lectures, Grace. Your thesis on algorithmic authentication is foundational to how I teach machine learning applications in art history. Grace sat down. You do? Every semester, I tell my students about the brilliant researcher who developed pattern recognition protocols that change the field. Catherine paused. What happened to you? The question was gentle, not accusatory, just curious. I got married, I had children. I thought I was making the right choices. And now? Now I'm divorced and discovering that maybe those choices weren't entirely mine. They talked for an hour. Catherine updated Grace on the field. New technologies, new applications, new researchers building on Grace's original work. I'd love for you to guest lecture next semester, share your original research, maybe talk about where you see the field going. I haven't worked in this field for 15 years. So, your foundational knowledge is still relevant. And honestly, Grace, 15 years of life experience probably gives you insights younger researchers lack. After the call ended, Grace sat in stunned silence. A guest lecture at her old university, talking about her work. When had she become afraid of her own expertise? Grace pulled out a notebook, started outlining ideas, how authentication technology could evolve, what problems needed solving, where opportunities existed. Her hand moved quickly. Ideas flowed naturally. She'd been storing them up for years. They just needed permission to emerge. At 8:30, Sophie came downstairs. She stopped in the doorway. You look different. Do I? You look like you're working, like really working, not just paying bills or organizing things. Grace smiled. I am really working. On what? Research I did a long time ago. I'm updating it, seeing if it still matters. Sophie poured cereal, sat at the table. Does it still matter? I think so. I hope so. Will you go back to work? Grace looked at her daughter. Maybe. Would that bother you? Sophie shrugged. Dad's always working. It's normal. I don't see why you shouldn't work too. Such simple logic. From a 14-year-old. Why had Grace made it so complicated? After the kids left for school, Grace went online, started taking courses, machine learning fundamentals, advanced AI applications, authentication technology updates. Her brain hurt. The concepts were advanced. The technology had evolved significantly. But she understood the foundation. She'd created parts of it. At 1 o'clock, her phone rang. Eleanor Sullivan, Derek's grandmother. Grace hesitated, then answered. Hello, Eleanor. Grace, I need to see you, privately. It's about the family trust. I'm not sure that's appropriate. I'll be at the Willow Creek Club at 3. The private dining room. Please come. Eleanor hung up before Grace could refuse. Grace sat staring at her phone. This felt like a trap. But Eleanor had always been different from Patricia. Sharper, more observant, less impressed by Derek's performance. At 2:45, Grace drove to the country club. She'd been a member for years. Derek's membership, technically. Everything had been Derek's. Eleanor waited in the private dining room, 71 years old, elegant, in a way Patricia tried for but never achieved. Old money didn't need to announce itself. Grace, thank you for coming. Eleanor gestured to a chair. Please sit. Grace sat. A server brought tea. Eleanor dismissed her. I'm going to be direct. Derek is my grandson. I love him, but he's become his father, a weak man pretending to be strong by diminishing women. Grace said nothing, just waited. My son did the same thing to Derek's mother, made her small, made her invisible, made her nothing. Eleanor's eyes were fierce. I watched it happen. I said nothing. I regret that every day. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm not watching it happen again. Not to you. Eleanor pulled out a folder. Do you know what's in the Sullivan family trust? Some stocks, property. I don't know details. The trust controls 62% of Sullivan Tech Holdings. Derek thinks he owns his company, but I do. His grandfather and I built that company. I still control the majority shares. Grace processed this. Derek doesn't know. Derek thinks his vote is sufficient. He's never bothered to check the trust documents. Eleanor opened the folder. I've been watching this divorce, watching how he treats you, how he talks about you. And I'm disgusted. Eleanor slid papers across the table. These are financial forensics. Derek has hidden approximately $4 million in offshore accounts. He's undervalued the company by 40%. He's systematically moving assets to avoid fair division. Grace looked at the documents. Bank statements, account numbers, detailed tracking of money movement. How did you get these? I'm the primary trustee. I have access to everything. Derek forgets that. He thinks his mother handles my affairs. But I'm 71, not senile. Eleanor's smile was sharp. I want you to have these documents. Use them in court. Show everyone what my grandson really is. Why are you helping me? Eleanor set down her teacup. Because I didn't help her. Derek's mother, Anne. She was brilliant, creative, talented. My son crushed her, made her doubt herself, made her small. She died at 62, heart attack. But really, she died long before that. She just stopped living years ago. Grace felt tears building. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be strong. Be stubborn. Be impossible to erase. Eleanor touched Grace's hand. I won't make the same mistake twice. I won't stay silent while a woman is diminished. Derek will be furious if he finds out you helped me. Let him be furious. I'm 71 years old. I don't have time for his feelings. Eleanor gathered her things. Use those documents. Fight for what you deserve. And Grace, don't just fight for money. Fight for yourself. Fight to be visible again. After Eleanor left, Grace sat alone with the documents. $4 million in hidden assets. 40% undervaluation. Systematic fraud. Derek hadn't just underestimated her. He'd actively stolen from her. Grace called Robert immediately. I have evidence. Major evidence. Can I come to your office? An hour later, Robert reviewed Eleanor's documents. His expression grew darker with each page. This is gold. Absolute gold. He's been lying about everything. Can we use it? Can we use it? Grace, this changes everything. Asset concealment, fraud, perjury if he testified about valuations. Robert made notes rapidly. This, plus your academic credentials, plus the intercepted emails, plus his deposition outburst. We're going to destroy him in court. I don't want to destroy him. I just want what's fair. Fair is what we're getting, but he's not going to like it. Grace drove home feeling strange, powerful, scared, angry, hopeful. All at once, she had ammunition now, real evidence. Derek couldn't talk his way out of this. At home, Grace changed clothes, went to her office, worked through more of James's research papers. Her brain was fully engaged now. She'd forgotten how good this felt, using her mind, solving problems, creating value. At 7, James called. How's your day going? Grace laughed. I got financial evidence that my husband has been hiding millions. My former professor wants me to guest lecture, and I'm actually understanding your research papers. So, complicated but good? James laughed too. Sounds like progress. It feels like chaos. Chaos is just change happening faster than you expected. James paused. Grace, I'd like to fly out to meet you in person, if that's okay. We could talk about the research, about possibilities, about what a real partnership could look like. You don't need to do that. I want to. I'm not trying to pressure you, but I think meeting face to face would help. We could grab coffee, talk, no commitments. Grace hesitated. Okay, when? This weekend? Saturday afternoon? Saturday works. After the call, Grace sat in her office. She was meeting James Thornton in person. After 16 years, the man who'd supervised her thesis, who'd called her work revolutionary, who'd tried to partner with her 5 years ago, the man Derek had hidden from her. Grace looked at her wedding ring, still on the desk where she'd left it. She picked it up, held it to the light. The diamonds sparkled. Beautiful, expensive, empty. Grace put the ring in a drawer, closed it, turned back to her work. Saturday came quickly. Grace was nervous. She changed clothes 3 times, settled on simple jeans and a sweater. Professional but not trying too hard. They met at a coffee shop downtown. James arrived exactly on time. He looked older in person than on video. Gray hair, lines around his eyes, but the same kind of expression, the same intelligence. Grace, he hugged her carefully. It's really good to see you. You too. They ordered coffee, found a quiet table in the corner, talked for 3 hours about authentication technology, about the field's evolution, about where things were going. Grace's mind engaged fully. She was keeping up, understanding, contributing. You're still brilliant. James leaned back. You're still seeing connections no one else sees. I'm 15 years out of practice. So practice. Take courses, read papers, update your knowledge. James leaned forward. Grace, I'm serious about partnering with you. Not as charity. I need your mind, your perspective, your expertise. I need time, the divorce, my kids. I can't just jump into a company partnership right now. I'm not asking you to jump. I'm asking you to consider it, to prepare for it, to know that when you're ready, the opportunity exists. James smiled. 5 years, 10 years. When you're ready, I'll be here. Why? Why what? Why do you care after all this time? James was quiet for a moment. Because in graduate school, I saw something rare, a mind that could see patterns and possibilities others missed. I knew you were going somewhere significant. He paused. When you disappeared, I assumed you'd moved on to something amazing. Then James contacted me through LinkedIn, and I realized what had actually happened, that someone had stolen your future. Derek didn't steal anything. I gave it away. Did you, or were you systematically manipulated into believing you had no other choice? Grace felt tears starting. She blinked them back. I don't know anymore. I don't know where his manipulation ended and my choices began. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe what matters is what you do now. James touched her hand briefly. You're not that 24-year-old graduate student anymore. You're stronger now. You've survived things. You've learned things. Use that. Build on it. They talked until the coffee shop closed. Grace felt more alive than she had in years. Walking back to her car, Grace saw her reflection in a storefront window. She didn't recognize herself at first. Then she did. She looked different, stronger, more present, more real. Grace smiled at her own reflection. Maybe she was coming back. Maybe the brilliant graduate student hadn't disappeared. Maybe she'd just been buried, waiting to emerge. At home, the kids were at Derek's for the weekend. Grace was alone. She didn't feel lonely. She felt free. Grace opened her laptop, started working on a presentation. Ideas for how her original algorithm could be updated, applied to modern technology, commercialized ethically. She worked until midnight, then kept working. At 3 a.m, she finally stopped. Her eyes burned, her head hurt, but she felt satisfied. She'd created something. Not dinner, not a clean house, not an organized schedule, real intellectual work, real value. Grace crawled into bed, closed her eyes, thought about the court date. 2 weeks away now, she was ready. She had evidence, she had expertise, she had proof of her value. But more importantly, she believed in herself again. That was worth more than any court ruling. Grace fell asleep smiling. Grace spent the next week preparing. She worked with Robert on her testimony, reviewed Eleanor's financial documents, updated her resume with academic credentials, compiled evidence of her contributions to Derek's business. Every night she studied authentication technology. The courses were challenging. 15 years was a long gap, but her foundational knowledge was solid. She just needed to update it. Catherine Reynolds called twice. They discussed the guest lecture, reviewed current research. Catherine sent Grace preliminary papers her students had written. You need to see what your work inspired, Catherine said. You changed the field, Grace. You need to remember that. On Thursday afternoon, Grace got a text from an unknown number. This is Eleanor Sullivan. I need to see you again. Same place, tomorrow at 2. Come alone. Grace arrived at the Willow Creek Club at 1:55. Eleanor was already in the private dining room. She looked different, tired, worried. Grace, thank you for coming. Eleanor didn't waste time on pleasantries. Derek knows I gave you the financial documents. How? Patricia. She saw us together last week. She told Derek. Eleanor sipped her tea. He came to see me yesterday. Very angry. Accused me of betrayal. I'm so sorry. Don't be. Don't. I told him exactly what I think of his behavior. We had quite the argument. Eleanor's smile was grim. He threatened to contest my control of the family trust. Suggested I'm too old to manage it properly. That's terrible. That's predictable. Derek doesn't like being challenged, especially by women. Eleanor pulled out another folder. But I have more evidence, and I want you to have it. Grace opened the folder. More financial records, property deeds, investment statements. Derek transferred the lake house to an LLC last year. He claims it's worthless in the divorce because it's under a business entity, but I have the original transfer documents. The house is worth $800,000. He's hiding it. Grace felt sick. The lake house, where they'd taken family vacations, where the kids had learned to swim. Derek was hiding it, making it disappear. There's more. Eleanor flipped pages. Investment accounts in offshore trusts, life insurance policies with cash values, stock options he hasn't disclosed. My grandson has been systematically moving assets for over 2 years, since before he asked for the divorce. Exactly. He planned this, Grace. He didn't fall out of love. He planned to leave you with nothing. Grace's hands trembled. 2 years. While she'd been making his dinners and raising his children and being his perfect wife, he'd been planning to destroy her. Why are you doing this? Grace's voice cracked. You could just stay out of it. Let us fight our own battle. Eleanor set down her teacup. Her eyes were fierce. I told you about Anne, Derek's mother, my daughter-in-law, how my son made her disappear. Yes. I didn't tell you everything. Eleanor's voice dropped. Anne tried to leave him. Twice. The first time he convinced her the children needed an intact family. The second time, he hired lawyers who destroyed her, painted her as unstable, threatened her with losing custody. She stayed. I'm sorry. She became a ghost. She stopped painting, stopped smiling, stopped being herself. She lived another 20 years. But she wasn't really alive. Eleanor's hands clenched. When she died, I found her journals. Pages and pages about feeling trapped, about wanting to leave but being too afraid, about losing herself piece by piece. Grace felt tears on her face. I stayed silent. I didn't help her. I told myself it wasn't my business, that marriages were private, that she made her choices. Eleanor looked directly at Grace. I was wrong. My silence killed her. Not all at once, but gradually, inevitably. It wasn't your fault. Yes, it was. I had power, money, influence. I could have helped her. I chose not to. Eleanor pulled out a handkerchief, dabbed her eyes. I won't make that mistake again. I will not watch my grandson do to you what my son did to Anne. I will not stay silent. Grace took Eleanor's hand. They sat together in silence. He'll fight you, Grace said finally. Derek, when he finds out you're helping me, he'll make it ugly. Let him try. I'm 71 years old. I've survived a world war, 3 recessions, and 50 years of dealing with men who underestimate me. I'm not afraid of my grandson's tantrum. Eleanor provided more evidence, more documentation, more proof of Derek's deception. Grace left with a briefcase full of ammunition. At home, Grace spread everything across her dining room table. The sheer volume was overwhelming. Derek had been hiding assets for years, systematically, deliberately, while pretending to be a loving husband. Grace called Robert. I have more evidence, a lot more. How much more? Another $8 million in hidden assets. Robert was silent for a moment. Jesus, Grace, this is massive. We're not just talking about divorce settlement anymore. This could be criminal fraud. What does that mean? It means Derek could face legal consequences beyond the divorce. Perjury, tax fraud, asset concealment. He could be prosecuted. Grace sat down. Prosecuted. She'd wanted fair treatment. Not to destroy Derek, not to send him to prison. I just want what I'm owed. I know, but the court will need to address the criminal aspects. We can't hide evidence of fraud just because it's inconvenient. After they hung up, Grace sat alone with the documents. Derek's entire fraud laid out in black and white. Numbers that told a story of betrayal, of planning, of deliberate cruelty. Her phone rang. James, how are you? Grace laughed. It came out slightly hysterical. I just discovered my husband has been planning to leave me penniless for over 2 years. So, not great. I'm coming over. You don't need to. I'm already in my car. James arrived 30 minutes later. He took one look at Grace's face and hugged her. She cried into his shoulder, all the anger and hurt and betrayal she'd been holding back. I'm sorry, she said finally, pulling away. I shouldn't fall apart on you. Why not? We're friends. Friends fall apart on each other. James looked at the documents spread across the table. Tell me what happened. Grace explained everything, Eleanor's help, the hidden assets, the years of planning, Derek's systematic betrayal. I thought he just stopped loving me. I thought we grew apart. But he didn't grow apart. He planned. He schemed. He deliberately destroyed our life while pretending everything was fine. James was quiet. His expression was dark. You know what's interesting about authentication? It's not about proving something is real. It's about detecting deception, identifying when something appears genuine but is actually false. He gestured at the documents. You've been living with a forgery for years. He looked like a good husband, acted like a partner, but he was always fake. You just couldn't see it until now. Grace laughed bitterly. I'm an authentication expert who couldn't detect the biggest forgery in my own life. And you weren't looking for it. Why would you? You trusted him. That's not a failure, Grace. That's being human. They talked for hours about betrayal, about trust, about rebuilding. James ordered pizza. They ate surrounded by evidence of Derek's deception. What happens now? James asked. Court in 1 week. We present everything. The judge rules, the marriage ends. And after? Grace looked at him. After? After the divorce, after this is settled. What do you want? No one had asked her that in years. What did she want? Not what Derek wanted, not what the kids needed. What did Grace want? I want to work again, to use my mind, to create value, to matter. You already matter. You have always mattered. You just stopped believing it. James stayed until midnight. When he left, Grace felt less alone, less afraid, less broken. She cleaned up the pizza boxes, organized the documents, prepared for the week ahead. 1 week until court. 1 week until the end of her marriage. 1 week until whatever came next. Grace went to bed, lay in the dark, thought about everything Eleanor had told her, about Anne, about silence, about choosing not to help. How many women had Eleanor known who'd been made invisible? How many had she stayed silent for? And how many women had stayed silent for Grace? Seen her fading but said nothing? Watched her become a ghost but remained quiet? Maya had tried to help, had asked if Grace was happy, but Grace had lied, had pretended everything was fine, had performed her role perfectly. No more performing, no more pretending, no more making herself small to make others comfortable. Grace fell asleep thinking about Anne, about Eleanor's regret, about the price of silence. She wouldn't be silent anymore. She would fight. She would demand recognition. She would be impossible to ignore, for herself and for all the women who'd been erased before her. The courthouse was crowded on Monday morning. Grace arrived early with Robert. They found a quiet corner to review final preparations. Derek's attorney will try to discredit Eleanor's evidence, Robert said. They'll claim she's biased, that she's acting out of spite. Is that likely to work? Not with documentation this thorough, but they'll try. Grace's stomach churned. She'd barely eaten breakfast, couldn't sleep the night before. This was it, the moment everything changed. Derek arrived at 9. Amber was with him, photographers clustered outside. Derek had called the press again, playing the victim for public consumption. Marcus Webb carried multiple briefcases. He looked confident, too confident. The courtroom was formal. Wood paneling, high ceilings, a judge's bench that loomed over everything. Grace felt small sitting at the plaintiff's table. Judge Catherine Morrison entered. Everyone stood. She was in her 60s, sharp eyes, no-nonsense expression. Please be seated. Let's begin. Marcus presented Derek's case first. Grace contributed nothing of value. She enjoyed a lavish lifestyle on Derek's earnings. She's now trying to take advantage of his success. Photos of the house, the cars, vacation pictures, all presented as evidence of Grace's parasitic existence. Robert rose to counter. Your Honor, my client did contribute significantly. Let me present evidence of her professional credentials. Robert submitted Grace's thesis, the 847 citations, expert testimony from 3 tech companies confirming the commercial value of her research, correspondence from Professor James Thornton detailing partnership opportunities Derek had hidden from her. Marcus tried to object. This is ancient history, irrelevant to the current proceedings. It's directly relevant, Robert countered. It establishes my client sacrificed a lucrative career to support the defendant's business. These aren't just academic credentials. This is proof of her professional value. Judge Morrison reviewed the documents. Her expression was unreadable. Continue. Robert presented Grace's detailed list of contributions, the Harrison Industries contract, the Japanese investors, every dinner party, every client relationship, every strategic connection she'd facilitated. My client wasn't just a housewife. She was the defendant's unpaid chief operating officer of lifestyle management. Her work directly enabled his success. She's owed compensation for 15 years of professional services. Marcus scoffed. She hosted dinner parties. That's not professional work. She researched clients, built relationships, facilitated multi-million-dollar contracts. If Derek had hired a professional to do this work, it would have cost him hundreds of thousands annually. Judge Morrison made notes. What about the defendant's asset disclosures? Robert smiled. That's where things get interesting, Your Honor. He presented Eleanor's evidence, the offshore accounts, The hidden properties, the undervalued company, the systematic asset concealment that had been occurring for over 2 years. Marcus's face went pale. Derek whispered urgently to him, "Your Honor, we'd like to request a recess to review these documents." "Denied. You've had discovery. You knew what was coming." Judge Morrison leaned forward. "Mr. Sullivan, did you disclose these assets in your financial affidavit?" Derek stood. "Your Honor, those accounts are complex business structures. They're not personal assets. They're titled in your name, funded with marital income. They're absolutely personal assets." Judge Morrison's tone was sharp. "Did you disclose them?" "I didn't think they were relevant." "You didn't think $4 million in offshore accounts was relevant to a divorce proceeding?" Judge Morrison looked at Marcus. "Mr. Webb, did you advise your client to conceal these assets?" "Absolutely not, Your Honor. This is the first I'm hearing of this." Derek's face went red. "That's not true. You said we didn't need to list every account. You said—" Marcus grabbed Derek's arm. "Stop talking!" But Derek couldn't stop. "She's trying to destroy me. She's working with my grandmother to steal my company." "Mr. Sullivan," Judge Morrison's voice cut through the courtroom, "sit down. Control yourself." Derek sat, but his face was furious. His hands clenched on the table. Robert continued methodically, presenting evidence, building the case, showing Derek's systematic fraud. Then he played the recording. Patricia threatening Grace about custody. Derek had known. He'd coordinated with his mother to intimidate Grace. Judge Morrison's expression grew darker with each piece of evidence. "This is appalling. Mr. Sullivan, did you direct your mother to threaten Ms. D. Sullivan?" "I didn't threaten anyone. I just wanted her to be reasonable." "By intimidating her about losing her children?" Derek stood again. "Your Honor, she's making this all sound worse than it is. Yes, I moved some money. Yes, I valued the company conservatively. But she's acting like I'm some criminal. I provided for her for 15 years. I gave her everything." "You gave her everything except honesty," Robert said quietly. Derek turned on him. "She was nothing before me. She was a grad student with a thesis nobody cared about. I made her somebody." Grace stood. She couldn't help it. "You made me nobody. You systematically erased me. You hid opportunities. You intercepted partnership offers. You made me small so you could feel big." "That's not true." "It's completely true." Grace's voice was steel. "I was cited 847 times. My work is foundational to a multi-million-dollar industry. I wasn't nothing. I was somebody. You just needed me to believe I was nothing so I'd stay invisible." Derek's face went purple. "I protected you. I took care of you. I built everything we had with my support. With my labor, with my sacrifice." Grace stepped forward. "You didn't build alone. You built on my back while I disappeared." Judge Morrison banged her gavel. "That's enough. Everyone sit down." "Now," said they sat. The courtroom was silent except for Derek's heavy breathing. "We're adjourning for lunch. When we return, I want both parties prepared to discuss settlement. Because if I have to rule on this, nobody's going to be happy with the result." The judge left. Grace collapsed into her chair. She was shaking. Robert squeezed her shoulder. "That was incredible. You spoke your truth." "I lost control." "No, you found your voice." They left for lunch through a side door, avoiding the press, avoiding Derek. Grace needed air. Outside, the November sun was bright. Grace squinted, fumbled for sunglasses. A limousine pulled up to the curb. The door opened. James Thornton emerged. "Grace, I wanted to be here for the good news." Grace stared. "What are you doing here?" "Supporting a friend." James smiled. "And perhaps discussing our partnership agreement." "My attorney made the changes you requested." Behind her, Grace heard a commotion. Derek and Marcus had emerged from the courthouse. Photographers swarmed. Then they saw James, the billionaire tech CEO, standing with Grace, opening the limo door for her. Derek froze, literally stopped moving. His face went through a series of expressions: confusion, recognition, jealousy, fear. Amber pulled out her phone, started Googling frantically. "That's James Thornton, Thorn AI. He's worth $3 billion. Derek's face went white. James spoke deliberately, loud enough for the cameras. Shall we discuss the partnership agreement over lunch? My attorney made those changes you requested. Grace found her voice. That would be perfect. Derek stepped forward. Grace, what partnership? Grace turned, cool, calm, in control. James and I went to graduate school together. We're collaborating on authentication technology, based on my research. Your research? Derek's voice was strangled. You mean that old thesis? That old thesis is revolutionary. James's tone was polite but firm. Grace's algorithm is the basis for my company's core technology. I've been trying to partner with her for years. Derek processed this. Grace could see the calculations happening. James was a billionaire. Grace had value, real, monetary, professional value. Amber whispered to Derek, she knows him? She knows a billionaire? Grace smiled. For the first time in months, a genuine smile. I should go. We're expected back in an hour. James opened the limo door. Grace started to enter, then turned back to Derek. You spent 15 years telling me I was nothing without you. Turns out you were something because of me. But I was always something on my own. I just forgot for a while. She got into the limousine. The door closed. Grace watched through tinted windows as Derek stood frozen on the courthouse steps. Reporters surrounded him now, asking questions about James, about Grace's research, about their relationship. Derek's mouth moved, but no sound emerged. The limo pulled away. Grace leaned back against the leather seats, started laughing. She couldn't help it. James smiled. Feel good? Feel good? James, that was the most satisfying moment of my life. They went to a quiet restaurant. Private room, elegant but not ostentatious, James ordered. Grace couldn't even look at the menu. I can't believe you did that. Did what? Showed up to support a colleague? James was innocent. Too innocent. You knew exactly what you were doing. That was a power play. Maybe a little. James grinned. He deserved it. 15 years of making you feel worthless. He needed to see exactly how wrong he was. They talked about the case, about the evidence, about Derek's meltdown. Grace felt lighter than she had in years. What happens when we go back? James asked. Judge Morrison suggested settlement. Robert thinks Derek will fold now. His fraud is public. His lies are exposed. He doesn't have leverage anymore. And if he doesn't fold, then the judge rules. And based on her expression, Derek's not going to like it. They returned to the courthouse at 2. The press had multiplied, cameras everywhere, questions shouted, microphones thrust forward. Ms. Sullivan, how long have you known James Thornton? Grace paused, smiled. We were colleagues years ago. I'm excited to be working together again. Are you partnering with Thorn AI? We're discussing several collaborative opportunities. What about the divorce? I'm confident the court will reach a fair resolution. Grace walked into the courthouse, James beside her. She felt powerful, visible, real. In the hallway, Derek and Marcus were in heated discussion. Derek saw Grace and James. His expression was murderous. Marcus approached Robert. Can we talk? Privately? They stepped aside. Grace waited with James. She could see Marcus gesturing. Robert remaining calm, Marcus looking increasingly desperate. Robert returned. They want to settle. They're offering fair division of assets, including the hidden accounts. What changed? You did. Showing up with James Thornton, demonstrating your value to the entire world. Derek knows he can't win now. Grace looked at Derek. He sat alone on a bench. Amber was gone. Patricia was gone. He was completely alone. I want the settlement in writing. Every asset disclosed, every account listed, and I want an apology. A public apology admitting he lied about my contributions. Robert smiled. I'll see what I can do. The settlement took 3 hours to finalize. Derek fought every line, every clause, every admission of wrongdoing. But ultimately he signed. He didn't have a choice. Judge Morrison reviewed the agreement. This is acceptable to both parties? Yes, Your Honor. Robert stood. Yes. Marcus's voice was flat. Then I approve this settlement. The marriage of Grace Sullivan and Derek Sullivan is hereby dissolved. Assets will be divided per the agreed schedule. Mr. Sullivan will provide retroactive spousal support in recognition of Miss Sullivan's contributions to his business success. Joint custody of minor children with the primary residence to remain with Miss Sullivan. The gavel banged. It was over. Grace sat in stunned silence. 15 years of marriage ended with a gavel bang. Outside the courtroom, press waited. Grace had prepared a statement. I'm grateful for a fair resolution. My focus now is my children and my career. I'm excited for the next chapter. What about your partnership with James Thornton? Mr. Thornton and I will be co-developing next-generation authentication technology. Our official announcement will come next month. How do you feel about your ex-husband? Grace paused, chose her words carefully. I wish him well. We're both moving forward. Derek emerged. Alone. He looked diminished, small, lost. Reporters rushed to him. Mr. Sullivan, did you know about your wife's research? Derek said nothing, just pushed through the crowd, got into his car, drove away. Patricia appeared from nowhere. She approached Grace hesitantly. Grace, perhaps I was hasty in my judgments. Grace looked at her former mother-in-law, Patricia, who'd threatened her, intimidated her, tried to make her small. You were protecting your son, I understand that. But Patricia, the next time you see a woman being made invisible, don't protect the person erasing her. Help her remember who she is. Patricia blinked, nodded. Yes, thank you. Grace walked to her car. Robert and James followed. Drinks? James suggested. I think we've earned it. They met Maya at a bar downtown. The four of them sat in a booth, ordered wine, toasted Grace's freedom. How do you feel? Maya asked. Grace thought about it, really thought about it. Free. For the first time in 15 years, I feel free. Not angry, not hurt, free. What are you going to do with that freedom? Everything. Learn, work, create, be visible, matter. Grace smiled. I spent 15 years being someone's wife. Now I get to spend the rest of my life being myself, and that's enough, more than enough. They celebrated until late. Grace felt light, unburdened, new. At home, Sophie and Thomas waited. Derek had told them about the divorce being final. Are you okay, Mom? Sophie asked. I'm okay, more than okay. Everyone at school is texting me about you and some billionaire. Grace laughed. James Thornton, we went to graduate school together. We're going to work together now. Are you famous now? Thomas looked concerned. No, honey, I'm just me again. Sophie studied her face. You seem different. I am different. I'm the mom I want you to see. Strong, independent, not perfect, but not invisible either. They ordered Chinese food, sat together watching a movie. Almost normal, almost like nothing had changed, except everything had changed. Later, alone in her office, Grace opened her email. A message from James. Partnership contracts. Her name listed as co-founder. Equity percentages. Salary that made her gasp. It was real. All of it was real. Grace looked at an old photo on her desk. Her at grad school, 24, confident, brilliant, smiling. She'd been trying to get back to that woman, that bright-eyed graduate student who knew her worth. But that wasn't the goal. The goal wasn't to go back. The goal was to go forward. The woman she was now had survived, had woken up, had fought back, had won. That woman was stronger than the graduate student had ever been. Grace opened a new document, started outlining her authentication project. Ideas flowed naturally. 15 years of stored creativity, finally finding expression. At midnight, she finally stopped. Her eyes burned. Her back ached. But she felt satisfied. She created something. Something valuable. Something real. Grace went to bed, lay in the dark, thought about the day, about Derek's face, about James's support, about the judge's ruling. She'd won. Not just in court. She'd won herself back. That was worth more than any settlement, more than any partnership, more than anything. Grace closed her eyes, smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow she'd start building her new life. But tonight she rested in the knowledge that she was enough. She'd always been enough. She'd just forgotten for a while. 6 months later, Grace stood in the conference room at Thorn AI headquarters. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. She was presenting to the board, her first major presentation as co-founder. The authentication protocol she developed was revolutionary, building on her original thesis, incorporating 15 years of advances, solving problems the industry had struggled with for decades. The board listened intently, asked questions, nodded approval. In the gallery, Sophie and Thomas watched. They'd taken the day off school. Grace had wanted them to see this, to see their mother being visible, valued, real. Eleanor sat beside them. She smiled at Grace, proud, satisfied. After the presentation, the board voted unanimously to move forward. Full funding, aggressive timeline, maximum support. James shook Grace's hand. "Welcome to the company, partner. Thank you for believing in me, for waiting." "I wasn't waiting, I was preparing, getting things ready for when you were ready." James smiled. "And you're more than ready now." Grace met her kids in the lobby. Sophie hugged her. "Mom, that was so cool. I didn't understand half of it, but you looked really smart." Thomas beamed. "You're like a scientist or something." "Or something," Grace agreed. That evening, Grace's phone buzzed. An email notification. She almost ignored it, then saw the subject line. "Congratulations." The sender, Derek. Grace opened it cautiously. "Grace, I saw the announcement about Thorn AI. Congratulations on the partnership. I'm glad you're doing well. Derek." Grace read it 3 times. No apology, no acknowledgement of what he'd done. Just a brief, awkward congratulations. She typed a response. Deleted it, typed again, deleted again. Finally, "Thank you, I wish you well." She hit send, closed her email, moved on. Derek was the past, Thorn AI was the future, but more importantly, she was the present. Grace Sullivan, 40 years old, co-founder of a technology company, expert in authentication, mother, friend, person, not invisible anymore, not small, not nothing, just herself, finally, completely, unapologetically herself. Grace opened her laptop, started working on the next phase of development. Her mind engaged fully, creating, building, solving. The woman she'd been at 24 would be proud. But the woman she was now at 40 was better, stronger, wiser. She'd survived erasure. She'd fought back. She'd won. Not because someone rescued her, not because a billionaire noticed her, but because she remembered who she was, because she refused to stay invisible. Grace worked until midnight, then went to bed satisfied, exhausted, happy. In the darkness, she thought about Anne, Derek's mother, the woman who'd become a ghost, who died invisible. Eleanor had stayed silent then, but she'd spoken up for Grace. She'd helped. She'd fought. Maybe that's how healing happened. Not fixing the past, but doing better in the present. Helping the next woman. Refusing to stay silent. Grace fell asleep thinking about all the invisible women, the ones still erasing themselves, the ones who hadn't woken up yet. She couldn't save them all, but she could be visible. She could be loud. She could show them it was possible to wake up, to fight back, to reclaim yourself, to matter. Grace Sullivan mattered. She'd always mattered. She just needed to remember. And now, finally, she did. Grace spent 15 years being invisible. It took one moment of remembering who she was to change everything. If this story resonated with you, if you know someone who needs to hear it, or if you've ever felt erased and found your way back, I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Your story matters. You matter. And if you enjoyed this journey from invisible to unstoppable, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We share stories like this every week. Stories about women who refuse to stay small, who wake up, who fight back, who win. Share this with someone who needs to remember their worth today. Because sometimes we all need a reminder that being someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's employee doesn't mean we stop being ourselves. Thank you for listening to Baraj's story. I'll see you in the next one. Until then, remember, you were always somebody. You just forgot for a while.